Okay, everybody, welcome to another episode of Highside, Lowside. My name is Zack. That, if you are watching, is Spurgeon Dunbar, and if you're listening, he's about to say something to prove he's actually here.
I am Spurgeon Dunbar. Zack is absolutely correct, and we have got a very exciting episode for you. Our guest today is going to be Mr. Ari Henning, and we are going to be talking about, this is kind of a flexible title, but it's best and worst moto advancements of the last 20 years. Pretty exciting stuff.
Basically, what things have come into motorcycling of late that have been really good and we like? What things have come into motorcycling lately that are screwing everything up and we don't agree with?
What don't we agree with? You're going to have to wait around to find out. We're going to get right into it, but first, a quick word from our sponsor. All right, so like we said earlier, we've got a pretty exciting episode for you. Ari Henning is going to be the guest, but before we jump right into it, we're going to go through our little charade of witty banter. All the people on YouTube will then leave the comments being like, the podcast doesn't actually start until 8 minutes in. These guys are just talking to themselves. That's the whole point of a podcast, for those of you that weren't aware. It's just 2 people, 3 people, sometimes 4 people just shooting the
I've got exciting news for you, Spurgeon, actually.
Lay it on me.
Have finally ridden an Aprilia RS660, so I can finally report to you that I can finally corroborate Ari Henning's findings, which is that that's a pretty good bike.
Pretty good bike. Now, do you have anything special in store for us for said RS660 per se?
I see what you did there.
Oh,
we are working on an episode of the Common Tread Experience, aka CTXP, that will feature the Aprilia RS660. Yeah, nice. Little YMCA thing going there. Yeah, so we're working on an episode that features the RS660. We're hoping to kind of dissect it as a machine and talk about where it sits in motorcycling. And that's just about all I can give away. But yeah, I've spent some time on it, and we're comparing it to other bikes, and we're doing actual testing. Very exciting. I'm excited about this episode.
I mean, I'm only privy to a little bit of what's been going on, but I would definitely say that if you are someone listening to this that has not tuned into CTXP yet, you should definitely check out those videos on our YouTube channel. But this next one is going to be quite a way to kick off the start of the year. And I am excited. I am a bit disappointed because now you've ridden the RS660, Ari's ridden the RS660. You both keep telling me how great of a bike it is. I need to get my leg over one sooner than later. But alas, I will wait and see how the CTXP episode turns out before I get too excited. Now,
that's
what
right.
I do want to say,
you can base how excited you are on that.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. Sure.
If you guys really get me excited about it, then maybe I'll go out and ride one. You hear that, Aprilia? Aprilia, if you're listening, maybe I will take a loaner RS660 from you. I want to start off by saying, we always appreciate it when you guys subscribe to us. But more importantly than that, if you could also leave us a review on Apple iTunes, it really does benefit us in a world of different ways. And it just helps it helps other people that might not be aware of the podcast find the podcast. And in order to incentivize you to do this, we are giving away free Highside, Lowside t-shirts to select. So, and this is important. People that we select as the review. You don't get a Highside, Lowside t-shirt just for leaving a review. But if you leave a review, whether it's favorable or not favorable, we will select ones at random. And Mr. Quartz, why don't you tell us who the winner is this week?
The winner this time around is N Harvey 17. Very much appreciate your review. The review says, in short, great podcast. I'm helping me learn about bikes. I do not have a bike, but I'm doing my research on riding like I'm doing a master's thesis. So respect, N Harvey, for your for checking us out, and it's good to know that it's helping you to a certain extent. He or she, I should say, has one gripe, which is that that we bleep out the swear words.
So I will say that this is something that we've had a pretty cognizant, I would say a pretty in-depth conversation on, right?
Yep.
And the reason we do this is that we want the podcast to be available for people of all ages. Now, I don't think there's a slew of 11-year-olds out there tuning into Highside, Lowside, but I do think that there are maybe parents out there that are listening to the podcast in a car while there are kids maybe in the back seat. So our goal with this is that we don't limit ourselves from swearing. If I want to sit here and call Zack Quartz
all right, easy. Okay, easy does it. Jesus.
I can say that, but then the editors just take care of it and they bleep it out.
All of that is to say, N Harvey 17, if you're listening, which we hope you are because we want you to do well on this thesis, send us an email to highside lowside at RevZilla.com with your information, and we will send you a free Highside Lowside t-shirt.
There you go. And you can also win a Highside Lowside t-shirt by entering your credit card information at RevZilla.com and having one shipped to your house. And we would encourage you to do that.
Those odds are a lot better, actually. 100% of the people that enter their credit card information at RevZilla.com do win a Highside Lowside t-shirt. So I think that's we got a call to action. Please leave us an Apple iTunes review. We gave away a t-shirt. Let's get our friend Ari Henning in here and start talking about best and worst things in motorcycling. There he is, everybody. Ari Henning in the flesh on the internet. I just saw you yesterday, and I saw you the day before that. You're probably tired of seeing me.
I see a lot of you, Zack.
You do see a lot of me. Would you remember the first time that you saw me?
I remember. I remember my first memory of you at the track in Loudon when there was one of those truck trailers. It's like a big ramp that you're supposed to drive a car on.
Yeah.
And we were on our pit bikes, and I was like, "Would you hit that?" And you're like, "Yeah, I'd hit that." And I'm like, we'll be friends. That's literally my first memory of you.
I don't know. I wish I had the same thing. I remember burning around garages and like tucking the front on our bicycles and like skinning our elbows
polished concrete floors.
Oh yeah.
Did either one of you actually hit the jump though?
No. It was one of those, like, you would have driven cars up on it, and we were on like little 80cc dirt bikes. But I mean, I'm surprised that I have a first memory and you don't, because you have a significantly better memory than I do.
Yeah, you always say that, but I don't know if I agree. Anywho, we are we're talking about most helpful and least helpful advancements in motorcycling in recent memory. So usually we do this guest honors. You can kick it off, Ari. This is the first one is the most helpful advancement in motorcycling in the past 20 years. What do you got for us?
The one thing I want to say
I thought it was 10 years.
Whatever. Yeah.
So here's the deal. We're going to throw it out there as 20, but we're not like we're going to stay within that range. Now, if you want to go back and say electronic ignition is like a big, thumbs up, that's probably too far back. We're gonna keep it to like 2000 to 2020.
Well,
but what I do want to say, Ari, is that the last time that we had you on, we made the mistake of like starting the conversation ahead of time, and then we brought you on and you didn't know exactly what we had said. So Zack and I have kept our mouths shut up until this point.
I don't believe that at all.
We have not led the jury. It is full guess honor.
The court is mine. Well, I was under the impression that it was the last 10 years, so I've done a little mental preparation. I think it still applies, but what I would like to provide for everyone is the idea that ABS, anti-lock brakes, has been a very, very big advancement in rider technology and safety.
And a quick note for all the viewers and listeners. What you're thinking is, Ari Henning doesn't realize that ABS has been around since the early 1990s in motorcycles, but I'm sure you can explain to people why the last 10 years has been so important for ABS.
Yeah, certainly. I'm pretty sure BMW was the first one to bring it to market, like you said, in the 80s, and it was some honking huge ABS module. But now Bosch and Continental have these beautiful compact systems. It's readily available on a variety of bikes, whether you're on a Goldwing or a K16 or a Ninja 400. And it's just a good safety net because, if you freak out and you have to emergency brake, it's good to know that there's electronics to save your ass.
Yeah. I remember reading an article when it was first introduced on the CBR 600. And there was a lot of uproar from, track enthusiasts that were like, I don't want ABS on the bike. And there was, I think it was Cycle World. They did a bunch of tests, and in every single test, the CBR 600RR with ABS completely outperformed the non-ABS version. And it was like, listen, like, we understand that there's so many of you purists out there that want to maintain, the authenticity of not having those rider's aids. But we've seen, ABS was really just the start of changing the entire landscape of really what rider aids can do for enhancing performance.
Yeah, I will specify that that the combined ABS on that CBR 600 was great. However, in track tests, because I did ride that bike at the racetrack, anytime you got light on the rear, the front would engage. So if you're actually riding aggressively at the racetrack, I definitely blew some apexes and ran off track because of the ABS.
It's interesting.
Yeah. And that's, another, that was probably what year, do you remember what year that was? Spurgeon, was that like 08 maybe?
I was going to say 07, 08. I was thinking 07.
It was after that. It was the combined ABS. Yeah, it was a great system. Yeah, and I think they still implement it.
To be clear, the combined ABS is slightly different than most ABS systems that have ever been to market, because what were the specifics of it, Ari? Basically, it ran a pump between the lever and the system, so you didn't actually feel the pulse in the lever.
Correct. It was extremely smooth.
Interesting.
Yeah. So pretty, it was quite advanced. But I think perhaps because of that, I don't know, maybe it was just complexity and weight and that kind of thing. But also because there was no feedback, that might have been one of the reasons that they kind of abandoned it, right? I don't know.
Yeah, and it was also expensive and complex. But getting back to it being a major advancement, I think a lot of people, to Spurgeon's point, are like, oh, like I'm good at braking. Like I practice my emergency braking. I can do an endo. But it's not about being prepared. It's not about dry pavement. It's not about being like, I'm going to see how hard I can brake. It's about being tired, being cold, riding home from work when it's raining and it's dark out, and having some guy blow a stop sign and you having to emergency brake through an intersection where there's crosswalk lines and manhole covers. Like, you can't argue with ABS being better in that scenario, no matter how talented you are. It's just, you can't react as quickly as the computer.
Well, not only that,
100%.
but I think when you talk about it, even for like a track day, right? I know that I've been in situations already where the most notable one was when I was testing this Street Triple RS, and I had a guy panic brake right in front of me as I was already leaned in, and I mean, I felt the ABS. I mean, if I wouldn't have had ABS, I would have tucked the front. And in that situation, the guy panic braked. I obviously panic braked as well because he slammed on the brakes right in front of me, and it saved me from sliding across the racetrack. So yeah, I mean, I have examples where ABS has definitely helped me out, especially in aggressive situations.
I want to tell a quick story about one of the reasons I think that ABS can be misunderstood sometimes. I participated in the BMW GS Trophy in Thailand in 2016, I think, and one of the guys I was riding with was super anti-ABS. He's like, I don't
I've heard this
want,
anecdote.
Yeah, I don't want ABS. I've used it before. I remember I don't like it. And I said, when when was this experience? And it turns out he had like a 2006 R1150 or R1200 GS, I forget which one it was. And he was like, it just was super cumbersome and it didn't work, and I don't like it. And we were riding, brand new GSs in 2016, and
Enduro ABS. And
exactly. I was telling him about how advanced it had gotten,
It's come a long way, man.
and we went down this like muddy descent that was kind of rutted and sketchy. And I convinced him to turn on the ABS and try it, and we got to the bottom, and he was like, I had no idea that was what the system could do. And I think that the point of that story is that if you think you experienced it, like if you experienced ABS once on a 2012 bike or a 2010 or a 2014 or something like that, and you think that how capable it is, it's advancing really fast. And the systems that are on pretty basic bikes now are so much better than they were on really nice bikes from 10 years ago or 8 years ago.
And they're cheaper, right? Like if you get a CBR 300, you can upgrade with ABS for $300 or $400. Like, it's definitely worth it.
Yeah. The other thing to note too is that the 2006 R1200 GS was probably one of the more notable bad ABS systems. They had nothing but problems with that system. So if that's the one that he bought and was like, I didn't like this, that doesn't surprise me at all.
It's understandable. Yeah, the early BMW stuff was pretty clunky, unfortunately.
But honestly,
freewheeling a few times.
But even, Zach talking about the ADV side of things, it's not just that ABS has gotten so good, it's gotten so programmable, right? Like, I think when you look at like the ADV side and like the Enduro side, like you can have ABS on at the front wheel in a reduced capacity, completely off of the back. You can still slide the rear into a corner, but you don't worry about tucking the front when you're going down something rocky or slippery. It is awesome.
It's good stuff. Indeed.
It's really remarkable. So one more quick thing on ABS. Going to toot my own horn, but I did write an article about the history of ABS. It is on Common Tread. It's, I think, worth the read. I interviewed some people from BMW, some people from Bosch, talking about how the systems have gotten better, and yeah, there's some interesting anecdotes in there as well, just about how big the first system was, which is like almost the size of a car battery, which is pretty remarkable when you think that now they're just tiny. So anyway,
itty bitty. Well, I am going to shift the conversation away from electronic rider aids, and I'm gonna pivot to the original riding aid, and that is tires, right? Like, we talk about anti-lock brakes or traction control, but really advancements in tires in the past, 15, 20 years have come so far with the introduction of, silica in the compounds. And the biggest problem that we have here is that most companies won't let us know what the proprietary information is, but I think we could probably all agree, whatever it is, tires have gotten pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, even if we're going back 20 years, then we can do the jump from bias ply to radials, and even that radial technology in the past 10 years has come a long way.
Yeah.
Expound, Ari. Tell us how. Tell us why.
Well, we've got jointless band technology, which I think is maybe a Dunlop patent, but Pirelli's also got their 0-degree belting, and it's basically a continuous winding from one shoulder to the other. And by different spacing between the windings and the tension they put on it, they can totally tune the way the tire behaves. So one of the really big benefits of a radial tire is it actually gives you a larger footprint at lean, and that's from being able to tune the tension of the carcass across the span of the tread. So they've been experimenting with it a lot, and it works really well. And you also get a tire that lasts a long time and doesn't overheat and is easy to plug. I mean, radials are great. There's no downside.
This is the part of the podcast where we start sounding pretty old and crouchy. Like, you kids don't know how good you got it back when we had to ride on wooden tires. Boy, it was a real headache, let me tell you.
No, but I do think it's interesting because it's not just that the performance has gotten so good and you can really trust your tires, but to Ari's point that he's made, the longevity. Like you can put a Pilot Road 5 on a sport touring bike and get 12,000 miles out of a rear, where 10 or 15 years ago, if you're getting 5,000 miles out.
You got to open the throttle more. Spurgeon.
Come on, man. Oh. No, but yeah, so 8,000 miles out of a rear. But no, yeah, I think for a lot of that, the longevity, the performance, it's just been phenomenal.
Yep, that's fair. I remember my dad saying when we were road racing together in the early 2000s, and I remember him saying he started racing in the mid 80s, and I remember him saying, like, I used to fall down and just have literally no idea. Like I would just be going through a corner and the bike would be gone, and I would think, what the hell happened? Like, I had and he said, now he's like, I go halfway through a corner and I think, I don't know if I'm going to make it through this corner. And the tire's nope, don't worry.
He probably became a better rider, right? Like,
yeah,
we all fell down a few times in the early days of our riding career, and we're like, we're not really sure what happened. Whereas nowadays when you crash, you know exactly what happened.
Yeah. Usually before you hit the ground, you're like,
this is gonna hurt. I see where this is going.
Where were we talking about that the other day? Where you and I were in a conversation the other day where we were like, once you get good enough, you can kind of learn from the crash, and you kind of realize why you crashed. And I forget where we were having that conversation at.
Are you talking to Ari?
Ari, do you remember that?
We had a column that Zack and I authored years back that was literally all about crashing and what you can learn from it. So maybe it was that. Maybe it was a content conversation.
Maybe. Yeah, but very cool.
It is interesting how you can how the better you get at something, the more likely you are to be able to find your mistakes.
Yeah, the more critical you're going to be of your own riding.
Yeah, exactly. Okay,
so what do you got, Zack?
My pick is helmet safety tech in particular, which in some ways is kind of tangential to ABS because there's been all these advancements, right? And people sometimes don't realize because you can't see these advancements inside the helmet. It's not just foam anymore. They've got all these nifty technology, which I know that you're a believer in the Bell Flex.
Absolutely, yeah.
Stuff, Ari.
And the 60.
Right, and 60, which ODS technology, which is omnidirectional suspension
system,
or something like that.
Yeah, suspension.
Something like
Sounds
that.
about right.
But basically what it is, I'll try and explain it quickly, but it's sort of, instead of there just being a layer of foam between the shell and the comfort liner, there are two layers of foam separated by these little...
They're like little hourglass rubber.
They're like squishy.
Little shocks, exactly. And the idea is that if your head hits the ground at a low speed, it absorbs that. And it's not just there to prevent your brain from shutting off. It's there to keep your head from being concussed or whatever.
Hopefully there to keep you from even seeing stars. Like a lot of the helmet standards are such that like they're supposed to keep your brain intact, but the rest of your body may be a hamburger. Whereas these new technologies are trying to keep in mind that not every motorcycle crash is this catastrophic 10-foot in the air Highside where you're going to whiplash your head into the ground.
Yeah,
exactly.
And that's the biggest differentiator that we've seen recently, where it's like a lot of times, helmet manufacturers have focused on high speed impacts and how to protect you in an aggressive crash. But more realistically, whether you're looking at just like around town crashes or, possibly even off road, it's those low speed impacts that the helmet isn't designed to fix. And that's really where, when you look at 6D, Bell especially with their flex technology, I can't say enough kind things about that. And it's the reason that, the flex, the Race Star Flex DLX is one where it's like I've seen that helmet become so popular at track days because it protects for low speed, mid speed, and high speed.
Yeah, and rotational.
Plus using MIPS. So
that's the other thing with Flex and MIPS and the ODS is it deals with those oblique impacts where instead of your brain having to rotate inside your skull, the helmet liner does that for you. And I personally am a big fan of that technology because my dad's racing career came to an end when he got a head injury that was called brain shear. It's when your brain rotates inside your skull when you hit the ground. So that technology didn't exist back then. It exists now, and I rock that helmet every chance I get when I'm at the racetrack because I definitely believe in it.
Is that the Bell helmet?
Yeah, I like the bell. I like the fit. I like the Soul Effects photochromic shield.
Yeah.
It vents like you've got a freaking fan in your head. It's also loud, but obviously I wear earplugs.
Sure.
But yeah, I just dig it.
Yeah, it is. So, not all helmets are created equal, although any helmet's better than no helmet. So
Yeah,
that's
but I would say
to
for anyone listening, if you do want to do some research, I mean, I would look up MIPS is probably the leader in rotational impact. There's a couple different manufacturers out there doing. I know Shoei finally introduced it in their new VFX Evo, where they have a little cap in the top, and it's supposed to reduce rotational impact by like 15%. Theirs is a proprietary design, but yeah, there's a lot of different aspects out there across manufacturers.
Yeah, well, we're agreeing up a storm here, you guys. So I think we need to.
Did you pick a topic where you're like, did you think that one of us was going to disagree with helmet safety? No, Zach. I wish that helmets were getting worse.
No. I think that we can all agree that ABS is good and helmet technology has really advanced, and whatever the heck Spurgeon said, I guess, is relevant, but I don't think it really matters that much.
Sticky tires.
Yeah, sticky tires. Tires have gotten better. That's true. And interesting, I think that all these things that we're talking about are things that you can't see. That it's really, and this is sort of an aspect of the article that I wrote about ABS that's on Commentary, is it's hard sometimes to see advancements. And when you can't, like, this is the reason that companies do facelifts on bikes, right? They make a new headlight shape so that people look at it and they think, oh, it's new. That's cool.
Oh, that's the new one. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But if, a lot of these things, helmet, whether it's helmet technology or tire technology or ABS technology,
You literally can't see it.
You can't see it. It's happening, but it is. And I hope that we are renewing some of your faith in the R&D and motorcycle industry, that work is being done. Promise behind the scenes.
One of the things that I know when we were talking about this ahead of time, Joe Zito even mentioned like fuel injection, right? And the improvements in fuel injection and motorcycle fueling over the past 10 to 15 years is vastly improved.
Yeah. Don't have to pull a choke lever anymore. You can just hit the starter button, whether you're at sea level or in Denver, whether it's hot or cold out, and it just runs well.
Yeah.
You kids, you don't know what it was like with carburetors.
Yeah, just sit there and wait for your engine to warm up.
We keep agreeing with one another too. I mean, where's the fun if we're not screaming at one another and people think that we all hate each other? So I guess we should move on and see if we can find one of those topics.
Exactly. Perhaps before we do that, it might be a good time to take a break and get a quick word from our sponsor, Spurg.
All right, so we are back and we are now shifting gears into what has been the most detrimental advancements in motorcycling over the past 20 years? And Zach, you went last prior, so why don't we let you go first?
Okay. Will do. My pick here is essentially TFT dashboard displays.
Oh, really?
And here's the thing.
You don't like colors, do you?
Too pretty for you? Too clear? Too easy to understand?
Hey,
you still got a flip phone, Spurge.
You know what, Zach, Ari, just so you know, and I'm not sure how much of this you remember, but like Zach is always making fun of me because like I like analog dashes, but here we go. He's going to come out and you're going to come out and you're going to say that you don't like TFT dashes.
Here's the thing. I will raise my hand and I will say I'm a sucker for I think the TFT dashes are beautiful. I think it's super fun. Like the whole Triumph thing where you can get it has one display, but there are 6 different display modes. Like you can have the tack be a bar tack or an analog tack, or I think that's awesome. However, they're getting distracting. It's like I don't.
And they're overwhelming.
Yeah, they are.
Some of them present so much data. It's just like
exactly
dial it down.
When you think about, there's 2 things. One, when you think about a dash on, say, Yamaha's MT10, what do you got, Spurge?
No, I'm just counting. I'm making sure I hold. Yeah, you have 2 things. So once we get to 3, you're cut off.
When you think about the dash on like a Yamaha MT10, it's a 2-color dash, very basic. There are no menus. You can't switch. You can't go into another screen. It's just one screen, but it has all the information that you need. It has a fuel gauge. It has traction control levels. It has, speed, trip meters, fuel gauge. It has all that stuff. Everything's there that you need. You can toggle through with a few simple buttons. And I definitely feel like there are times when a bike is almost encouraging you to do too many things while you're riding. And I don't think
it can be distracting, right?
Exactly. And I can't subscribe to that. I think that Yeah. So that's my pick.
You really
Wait,
feel
wait,
like
what-
you
did I-
wish we went all back to LCD and analog tax?
Okay, I don't know if I can say that.
Yeah.
I think that having all the colors is nice. I don't know. Is there a way that we can have TFT dashes, but they just like won't let you do? What if they just didn't let you do anything while you were moving?
So here's the deal. I don't think that they shouldn't let you do anything while you're moving, per se. But I do agree with. So I disagree with TFT dashes. I'm going to go on the record and say I like TFT dashes. I think that I like the technology. I think that for a lot of it, the readout is really kind of cool and crystal. And I think the second part of TFT dashes that I like is that it's helping to bring in a younger audience. There is an audience that was raised on smartphones, and a TFT dash makes this seem like it's new and it's hip and the technology matches, right? Exactly, it's up to date. So what I will agree with you on, however, is that it's gotten too complex. And you had mentioned Triumph's TFT dashes with 6 different displays that you can pick from. I don't give a shit about that. But what I do have a problem with is now you can sync your GoPros, you can sync your phones. Like at some point,
You can get
there's too
CarPlay
much.
on
There's
Hondas.
too much that you're trying to do with your thumbs while you're riding. That's what I have a problem with.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I think that's accurate. I agree. I mean, I like the colors are beautiful. Some of those dashboards are just beautiful. But I will also admit that when sometimes, I'll be on a bike and you can't, like on BMWs, you can turn traction control or ABS off on the move. You can toggle through that stuff. And I love that. I think it's so slick. Do I think that it's the best idea for everyone to have the capability to do that? Probably not. I don't think that. I think that if manufacturers decided, the unwritten or written rule, whatever, that you can't make adjustments while the bike is moving, you can't make any suspension adjustments, you can't make any safety aid adjustments, I think I would be disappointed for myself, but I would sit back and think that's probably the right decision.
Yeah, well, that's kind of a whole nother discussion, right? Because if you can't change traction control while you're riding at a track day, or you can't change ABS modes while you're riding on a trail on a GS, like that would kind of suck if you have to pull over. We've ridden bikes where you have to pull over and be stopped and have the bike in neutral change anything, and it's infuriating. So
it's annoying, yeah.
So I have 2 questions. One, well, first of all, you talk about having to pull over and do it. The one that I've seen that's the worst is the Tenere 1200, where you actually have to put the bike up on the kickstand or up on the center stand, like do a whole song and dance.
And
yeah. And I'm like,
you have to
who thought of
confuse
that?
the computer to turn the TC off.
I was on an off-road course once. It was an off-road school, and this one guy, the poor bastard, had a Tenere 1200, and we're in like this deep sand, and he crashed, and then he's trying to like lift the bike up, put it on a center stand in deep sand, and like who would want to have to go through this?
I think
too many hoops.
I think that was the bike that we when we did that big ADV test, Ari. I feel like it was the Super Tenere where we just took the ABS sensor off the front wheel with that little Allen screw, because we couldn't. It was so frustrating. Like the ABS wasn't very good, and it kept on getting in the way. So we were just like, let's just take the sensor off and let the light be on and whatever.
So yeah,
do not try that at home, by the way.
Having control, having flexibility, being able to manipulate those settings is obviously very important. So I think it's a fine line between how much control should the end user actually have.
Yeah, I mean the Goldwing's got CarPlay, very cool, but like, is it too much? I don't know.
I personally think it's too much. I still ride motorcycles to some degree to escape all of that stuff.
Yeah, agree.
Yep.
So I don't want to be fully immersed in my normal life with all of my digital connectivity when I'm on a motorcycle. I want to be able to focus and enjoy what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that 100%. But my question now goes back to Zack. And so, Zack, is it that you don't like? No, is it that you don't like TFT dashes, or do you not like all of the extra bells and
What it
whistles?
entails.
Yeah, I think I don't like what TFT dashes represent, which is oftentimes a litany of options and distractions while you probably should be riding the motorcycle or focused on other things. I can't deny that I like the colors and the menus and the animations, and like some of the systems are quite good also. They work pretty well. But I think that because it represents this move toward more things that you could be doing instead of riding the motorcycle, I'm concerned about it.
I feel like it's pretty funny that a TFT dash, in order to have the most effective tachometer, has to revert to an analog. You digitize an analog needle, because it's just the easiest. It's the most effective tachometer. You can look at it at a glance. Like those bar graphs don't particularly work for me.
No, they don't, because every bar is different. Whereas every a sweep of a needle is understandable. Whereas the bars are like different. They start on the side and go to the top or something.
Yeah,
you never know what they're.
But what's nice about the Triumph one is you can actually program your name. So for somebody like yourself, Zach, you can be like, you can teach the bike to like really just, welcome, and then you know that it's really you that they're talking to.
My
That is so aggressive, Spurg.
No, so in fairness, Ari missed the first part of the conversation where we kind of went into the profanity on the show. But yeah.
Okay, I guess we're dialing it up. Huh? I can start dropping F-bombs.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to, they all get beeped. It's just more beeps to be added.
How much talk do you want to make for Bernie is really what we're trying to to figure out.
So I feel like I got a little bit barbecued, maybe rightly so, for my pick for the most detrimental advancement in motorcycling over the past 20 years. I think it's Ari. Should we go Ari next? Is that okay?
Yeah, well, I think it kind of dovetails nicely because my complaint kind of is complementary to your complaint, and that's just overall complexity of bikes. Like you guys both know, I like to spend my afternoons and weekends in the garage wrenching on stuff, and for the most part, I'm working on older, simpler bikes because they're easier to understand. And you get a bike now that's got everything, if it's CAN bus or it's got a TFT dash or it's got ride-by-wire throttle, and there's just all these technologies that you need to spend thousands of dollars to get the electronic components to even communicate with them or clear code or understand what they're complaining about. Yep. It's moving so far beyond what the DIY mechanic, someone who wants to get dirt into their fingernails and maintain their own motorcycle, is capable of doing.
Yeah. Don't even get Spurgeon Dunbar started on electronic suspension.
Yeah. I mean, that's,
It's heavy and complicated.
It's nice when it works, but when it breaks, like, what the hell are you going to do?
Yeah, so that's part of my thing is like some of these electronics get extremely complicated, especially if you're not, riding around town. But I do have a question for you in that regard, Ari. Is have you tried or messed around with any like non-proprietary software to if you go to a
You mean like pirated software I may or may not have bought off Amazon?
Yeah. So I guess like it's one thing if you go to like the Ducati shop and they plug it into the Ducati computer, but have you tried any of this stuff that you can buy at home and try your own programs at home?
Yeah, I have, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating to be like, oh, it's misfiring. Like I'll check the jet, or I'll check to see if the throttle cable is sticking, or I'll check to see if the petcock is flowing fuel, and instead you've got to like plug in and hope the OBD2 sensor like tells you what fuel pressure is. It's just it's gotten to a level of complexity where you're really just going to have to throw your hands up and take it to a shop.
So here's my question for you. You have just been, you're king of motorcycling. You can decide the fate of manufacturing. What electronic complexities do you keep, and what ones do you say it's all in the dumpster? You're not allowed to make that anymore. Fuel injection.
Man. Fuel injection, we got to stick with fuel injection. I mean, that's tried and true. There's very few issues that actually crop up with that, and they're kind of easy to track down. But
and we're keeping ABS, I assume, because you said this.
Electronic suspension, I could definitely do without. I think that's too much. I think from weight, cost, complexity, difficulty to repair, and also some of those systems, similar to what you were saying, Zach, they don't allow full flexibility. They give you like these ABC or these different modes, hardware, software, whereas you're like, no, I just want 2 clicks of compression. And it's like, do you want it firmer? And you're like, yes, but I don't know what you're actually doing. So I would do without electronic suspension. Frankly, I would do without TFT dash. What else would I do
another guy, another person on the TFT hater train.
Before we go down this road where we just have Ari take the motorcycles back into 1970, what I do want to throw out there as a counterpoint to this is that obviously, Ari, you are someone that works on your bike and you understand the mechanics of it, but there's probably a lot of people out there listening to this that naturally just take their bike to the mechanic past an oil change, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. And I would argue that all this technology does make the motorcycle easier to diagnose at a shop. If you walk in and they can plug a computer in and they say, oh, you have a misfiring O2 sensor or a faulty O2 sensor, or, we can see that, this is coded out. We just have to replace the sensor.
And you know how much that sensor is going to cost, Spurgeon?
That's not the point. The point is that how much was it cost to sit there and have a mechanic diagnose half of this stuff ahead of time?
They can diagnose it quickly, but there's so many more things to fail, and so many of them are complex, complicated electronics, like an OBD2 sensor, a Lambda sensor, which is going to be like $300 or $400. And some bikes have 2 or 3 of them now. So that all goes part and parcel with like bikes getting too complex, where basically the expense of maintaining them and repairing them is becoming
But I would want to know, like, realistically, how many times are we looking at these sensors failing? Is it something where we're seeing these like certain components fail regularly? And this is a brand by brand, question. But I would argue that for a lot of these cases, this stuff has gotten really good, and it's not failing as much as
some
maybe
of
it
it
used to.
Some of it hasn't been around long enough to show its faults, right?
To fail.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, so I know that when we talked about best and worst bikes, or sort of things of 2020, I know that you had chimed in, although you weren't a guest on that podcast, Ari. You had chimed in and said that you were disappointed in the direction that the Africa Twin took, because it used to be this like simple kind of bare bones, granted modern, but bare bones ADV, and now it's got adjustable wind protection. It's got a TFT dash. It's got 2 dashes, for crying out loud.
Electronic suspension in the upper version.
Buttons. So many buttons. Talk about distractions.
Yeah, more buttons than I think I've ever seen.
More buttons than a TI-83 Plus.
Yeah.
Is that a calculator joke? Are we making calculator jokes at this point?
I still have mine, man.
So that's like a practical example of what you're talking about. Is that accurate?
Precisely. And I think that expands to a lot of different factors of ownership, whether it's using it or maintaining it or paying someone else to maintain it or fix it. The complexity is problematic.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I would love to dig into exactly which things Ari would allow in the modern motorcycling, which things he would disallow. But as you might say, Spurgeon, that's a whole nother podcast.
So
I think it's your turn now,
things.
right? It's your turn for your most detrimental advancement in motorcycling.
So as you guys are giving these examples, I think your examples were probably more wide sweeping across multiple brands. Mine is very specific. It's just something, maybe it's not even detrimental, but it's something that I don't think you're ever going to see happen again. And that would be the Honda Goldwing getting a airbag. And for those of you that are listening to this that don't know what I'm talking about, Honda actually had an option on their Goldwing for a couple of years where you could have an airbag model where there was an airbag built into the handlebars, and if you crashed, it basically just shot out, and supposedly it didn't knock you off the bike backwards.
Yeah, exactly. Shot you off the back of the bike like a catapult.
I would just like to say that we're throwing a lot of shade at Honda in this episode. This was not intentional. We weren't trying to say like the Africa Twin's stupid and airbags on Goldwings are stupid and buttons are stupid and CarPlay is stupid and Honda's stupid.
Don't forget that CBR 600 ABS reference there too.
Man, this like turned into a Honda podcast. I don't know how that happened. Anyhow, so keep going here, Spurge. So I think that it would be a reasonable assumption to make that if you're going to hit something on a motorcycle and you could have an airbag go off in front of you, that would be good.
So
why
think
isn't that good?
I don't necessarily believe that, one, it's cost effective. Two, it's necessarily going to keep you on the motorcycle to begin with. I think if you're going to hit something on a motorcycle, you're not in a harness seatbelt, you're going to fly out and over. And I think that what we've really seen. What do you say, Zach?
There's a lot of factors there that, they put airbags in cars and they work great because you're in this cage and you're in a seatbelt.
Yes.
Whereas on a motorcycle, a lot of different things can happen.
And the point to that is we've seen the airbag technology shift to rider airbags, right? Where you wear a wearable airbag. And that makes so much more sense to me, because if you are thrown off the bike, regardless of how or where you land, if you're wearing a helmet, you have the airbag on, it is going to help you walk away from the crash. That's all. I think. I guess I would say Honda, nice try at throwing that technology out there. However, I just don't see that as something we're ever going to see again.
I would like to say I just went to the Honda website, and sure enough, there's a 2020 Goldwing Tour airbag automatic DCT available.
Look at that. So they haven't learned, and so this is actually a very topical pick, I guess, on my part.
It is, yeah. I mean, I would
be interested to know how many they sell, right? Because it used to be that you had to opt into the airbag option. I would be wondering how many people are opting into the airbag option.
Yeah. I also just out of curiosity, I wonder what the data looks like compared to DCT. Because I know they're selling more and more DCT models for, especially for Goldwings.
Can you? So if you're on the website, Zach, can you choose, or do you? If you buy DCT, does it automatically bump you to airbag?
No,
it certainly seems like an upgrade.
There are 5 trim levels of the Goldwing on the website. You got your base Goldwing with no top box. You got your Goldwing with DCT, no top box, and then you got your Goldwing Tour, which comes with a top box. Or you can get the Goldwing Tour with a DCT, or you can get the Goldwing Tour with a DCT and an airbag.
But you can't get an airbag with just a manual transmission.
It seems like you cannot.
Interesting.
So they must
special request.
Yeah, special request. Anyway, I will say that we have a little bit of first and second hand experience with airbag technology, Ari and I, and it is quite good. It's gotten quite good, and having an airbag on your torso and one that can tell when you're going to fall off a motorcycle and inflate before you hit the ground is really it
makes sense. That makes more sense than having an airbag on your handlebar.
Yeah. Not to mention, well, I mean, for a bunch of reasons, right? Not least of which is you can take that airbag and then ride a different motorcycle, and then you still have an airbag.
Yeah, and I think what's
it's not just a rear ender incident, right? Like presumably that Goldwing setup is ideally it's when you rear end a car or something immovable. That is when that airbag is going to be most effective. Whereas an airbag suit, you can Highside, you can Lowside, you can rear end someone can rear end you, and it's still going to work.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this in previous episodes, so I don't want to belabor it too much. But if folks out there haven't been following along, the airbag technology has advanced so much, and the prices have dropped down to a pretty reasonable level too. And it's all electronic, these days. There's still the tethered systems, but really the advancements we've seen is all with the electronics.
Yeah, it's very impressive. So basically, things that work in cars don't necessarily work in bikes, e.g., CarPlay, airbags, and something else that we were talking about, I think.
Air conditioning.
Electric windows.
So the final category that we're going to run through here today is an advancement in motorcycling. This is sort of like an honorable mention. An advancement in motorcycling that we feel like we either have a bone to pick with it or it has affected us personally, and we think that we want to give it a shout out. So I think for the final go round, we'll go guest honors again. Ari, you can go first.
Well, I mean, let's see. It's got to be small bikes. You guys know I'm just a total dork when it comes to small motorcycles, and it has just been prime time for folks like me that like the small displacement category. And I mean, if you rewind 10 years ago, your only option was a Ninja 250 or a Rebel 250. And now go into a dealership and look at what you can get if you want something smaller than 500 cc's. And something if you only want to spend $5,000 or less, you have so many more options now.
I mean, I think it could be
sport
argued
bikes,
that you
ADV
are
bikes.
What do you say?
Yeah.
Sport
Sport bikes, ADV bikes, all sorts of options.
Yeah,
and that's
they're abundant.
And I think not only is it fun for not only is it beneficial for the beginner crowd, but I think for a lot of riders out there, they're realizing that if you drop down in displacement, you can actually have a lot more fun because you can start really using all of the power that the bike has to offer.
Yeah.
It's all these entry points into motorcycling that weren't available before, affordable entry points, and then those people segue up to larger bikes, and then you have this huge used market of motorcycles. So I think it's great for motorcycling, and the hardware itself is fantastic. I mean, they're, like you said, Spurgeon, they're fun motorcycles to ride.
Yeah. And we're seeing a lot of the R&D trickle down, right? So not only are these just beginner bikes that are stripped of all the the bells and whistles, we're seeing better suspension. We're seeing some of the electronic rider aids. We're seeing a lot of this smaller segment benefit from all of this stuff.
Yeah, and we're also contradicting ourselves about electronic rider aids and technology.
Well, I was actually just gonna say, I feel like this is kind of I don't know, this jives with what you were saying a little bit, Ari, because that class of bikes often they have ABS and fuel injection, but that's basically it. There's no electronic suspension. There's no fancy menus in the dash.
I mean,
there's
TFTs on the KTMs now.
That's true. Yeah, there's TFT dashes are creeping down there, and obviously it's all going to trickle down, and eventually there's going to be a KTM 390 Adventure with electronic suspension and 5 different screens and menus.
Yeah, and
I hope not.
I would just say too, like I know I mentioned suspension earlier. I hope that I was not taken as implying that these smaller bikes have electronic suspension, but I do think that when you look at them, the suspensions are just better than they were. If you would have looked at like a Ninja 250 and what you got out of that suspension versus something off of a Ninja 400, the suspension is just better right out of the box.
I mean, you're not excited to ride on a motorcycle with a 32-inch fork, or sorry, 32-millimeter fork?
No,
just a little spaghetti noodle.
They just give up on me. They just bend.
Yeah.
Spurgeon, you love talking about suspension, do you not?
I do. That's actually my pick.
Is it?
Oh, really?
Yeah. So my pick is specific. It's
nice.
That's perfect.
Yeah. Great segue.
Nailed it.
We're really nailing this podcast thing. No, so my pick is long travel suspension, because I think what we've really seen is that manufacturers have been able to find a balance with being able to produce long travel suspension on adventure bikes that is still really compliant and great for use in sporty conditions. So that's been my pick, is the advancements that we've seen specifically with long travel suspension.
Better be compliant if it's got 10 inches of travel.
Yeah, but I think the problem that you saw with a lot of earlier stuff, you look at 7 or 8 inches of suspension travel, and it wasn't nearly as sporty as something that has 4 inches of suspension travel. And I think what you're really seeing now is that the advancements have allowed you to get the best of both worlds.
Does that overlap with electronic suspension? Because what advancements in particular?
I mean, mostly it's the complexity of the internals. I'm not an engineer. I just ride the stuff. But I know, for example, earlier this year when I got to pull apart, a stock WP suspension and a stock Pro component suspension, and just looking at the different valving and how they're able to have different circuits throughout the stroke, so that you can have it. The initial stroke is really soft. So if you are riding it off road, it really offers a lot of give, and as you get into the mid stroke, it starts to stiffen up. And I could keep going. This is probably a podcast in itself too. But
I think Zack just cleared his throat so you wouldn't.
Yeah, I know. That's why I assumed that Zack clearing his throat was to shut me up. So yeah, that's what we've seen a lot of.
That was the safe word or the safe sound.
Yeah.
Spurgeon Dunbar, the long travel suspension.
Pineapple.
Journalist.
Pineapple. Oh, okay. That's when we stop talking now.
Guys, I'm excited about my pick. Can I?
Yeah.
Go
What do
now?
you got?
Go
man?
for it.
Okay, Ari Henning. Do you remember when you had already worked there for a few years, but I first worked at Motorcyclist Magazine. We did a test of every Bluetooth headset or communicator that you could strap to a helmet and talk to your buddies with. And by and large, they were garbage. They were just
Remember
terrible.
the Chatterbox? You had to push a button to talk to your friends.
Yeah.
It was so bad.
It was particularly bad. Chatterbox, I will say, they did have going for them that I think that was actually radio signal and not
The range
Bluetooth.
was ridiculous.
So the range was insane,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool. But still, the systems were pretty bad, and that wasn't that long ago. Bluetooth communicators have come a long way, and I think they've really changed the dynamic of motorcycling in some ways. I mean, we went from only taking rides as a staff of the magazine when we had time to not talk to each other to getting to a point where we would wrap an issue and then we'd go on a ride and we'd have a meeting while we rode, because you can actually just talk.
Awesome.
You can discuss future stories and future sections of the magazine while you were riding, and not least of which is relevant in COVID times. I mean, I have a friend who I can't be close to, because we're not supposed to be close to people during a pandemic, but we can go on a motorcycle ride and we can talk for an hour
Have a
or
conversation.
two.
Yeah,
Have
you
a
don't just have
conversation.
to. You don't just have to point at your gas tank to indicate that you need fuel. You don't have to point at your crotch to say you got to take a leak. You don't have to point at your stomach to say you're hungry. You can actually be like, do you guys want tacos or burgers, or do you want to try and find a Mediterranean place for lunch? You can actually have full on conversations.
In fact, that actually reminds me of another bit we did in the magazine. We had a quick thing in the back that was like a motorcyclist's guide to hand signals, right? It was tap on your head if there's a cop.
There's a cop
and
coming
then
up.
you'd point to the gas tank if you got to get gas, and you point to your tire if you're whatever. You know what I mean? Like all these
One of the things I love, because you and Spencer and I ride together so often, is we'll be out testing or we'll be out filming, and whoever's in the lead, you go through a corner and there's a rock or there's dirt, and you can just say, you can be like, guys, dirt on the inside of this next corner.
Yeah.
Or if you're trying to pass or whatever, you can just communicate these things that impact each other's safety in such a big way.
As opposed to the old school where it's like you stuck your foot out to try and indicate that there was gravel or roadkill or something like that.
Which is still useful if you're riding with someone who doesn't have, you're
Sure.
not talking to over Bluetooth. But it is just remarkable technology. It's pretty accessible. It's easy to use. They last all day.
Batteries last all day. Yeah.
Well, I would argue too,
they're
even if
pretty
you
good.
look at, in the past 5 years, we've seen the introduction of mesh technology, overtaking even Bluetooth.
Yep.
And
Yep.
if you are a group rider and you're still riding with the old Bluetooth system where it would drop off and you'd have to reconnect, I would say that the new mesh systems from Cardo especially are just, they're fantastic. I mean, we've had 8 or 9 people together, and people naturally come back in if they leave a ride. It's really impressive stuff if you are riding with a group of people.
Do you have a conversation with 8 people on one channel?
Ugh.
Does that
I
work?
don't, but you can, is my point.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Well, so it works. So if we're doing an adventure, we have a lot of organized dual sport or adventure days, and if we go out with 6 people in our group, it just helps where if the range is we're all riding, outside of sight range or within 500, 600 feet, if somebody's in the back of the pack and they go down, you can say, hey, just hold up, I'm down, or just give me a second. That's where it does help if you are in a 6 or 7 group. My street rides are usually 1 or 2 people in addition to myself.
Like to cap them at 3 or 4 as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've even, Ari and I have taken rides where there've been, 3 or 4 people, 4 or 5 people, whatever. And we'll just like 2 people will pair and then the other 2 people will pair. And like,
Yeah.
you just talk to one person for this part of the ride and you can link up with someone else for the
simple.
next section, whatever. Like we don't need to have a 4-person conversation. So just out of curiosity, Spurgeon, when you said you're on that off-road ride and someone at the back like fell down and they were like, "Hey guys, I fell, wait up." Was that any person in particular, or was that
We
was a friend of yours, I assume? Not you,
we just pretend not to listen to them and we blow them away. No, I mean usually it's me. Usually I'm in the back with the bike on top of me, being like, "Wait." But yeah. So whether we listen to that person and actually pull over and wait for them or go help them is a completely different story. And
But at
another
least you know.
podcast for
At
another
least
day.
you know where they
Exactly.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so quick shout out to Lance Oliver who mentioned when we put this question to him of advancements that he feels like have affected him personally, and he said diversity and accessibility of professional training. And I feel like that's probably true. There's track days have become a big deal, and there are lots of schools and instructional facilities that you can go to and learn from. Certainly more than you could 10 or 20 years ago, I think.
Yeah, there's even individuals. Like if you go on Craigslist right now, there's people who are offering training. When I go to the kart track, there's people offering training there. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. Very cerebral answer
Yeah.
from a cerebral fellow, that Lance Oliver.
But no, I like the fact too that he had listed out and mentioned like different off-road riding schools by name and some of the track schools. But I think what's really great is that we've seen little independent shops open up. Like here on the East Coast, we have the Pine Barrens Adventure Riding School where you can actually take your bike out to New Jersey and they will show you in a 2-day course how to ride it. You don't have to worry about, heading out to Colorado or California to do rawhide where the expenses become almost prohibitive. So I would say that
options.
Yeah, all the local options that you see pop up have been great.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, as Ari said, a good shout out from a good man, that Lance. So that brings us to the end of our cheers and jeers.
Should we do a summary? You want to do a summary,
podcast.
Zach?
Yeah, okay. We can do
Can
a
you
quick
remember?
summary here.
Are you going to be able to keep track of everything?
Can you do it without
I'm
looking
gonna-
at your paper?
I'm gonna
sure.
I'm gonna need a little bit of help. So Ari, it was ABS. So for the positive advancements in motorcycling, Ari had ABS, Spurgeon had tires, and I had helmet technology. I think we agreed on all those. And then for detrimental technology, Ari, what was yours again, Ari?
It's complexity as it pertains to
right.
repair and maintenance.
Right, which is fair. And then I complained about TFT dashes, which I couldn't even do very well because they are beautiful. I do wish that there were fewer, fewer distractions while we were riding. And then Spurge said that Honda should not be making that airbag anymore. Which I'm curious.
I
to
didn't
hear what
realize it
Brad
was
says about
even
that.
in the new Goldwing.
you
So now
definitely
I
thought it
feel
was something in the past,
yeah.
huh? You thought they already made that decision.
Yeah.
And then, of course, that our honorable mentions, Ari said small bikes, great answer. Spurgeon said long travel suspension, terrible answer. And I said Bluetooth communicators, which, of course, is...
It's a tremendous answer. Absolutely.
So anyway, I hope you guys have gotten a kick out of our conversation today. Ari, I think we can let you get on with the rest of your day, but thanks for stopping by and hanging out with us. Good to see you again after
Always
all of
fun
these
chatting
years.
with you guys. Yeah, I'll probably see you in a couple hours, Zach.
Sounds
All
good,
right.
man.
Bye, guys.
See you. Well, it's always a pleasure having your partner in crime, Mr. Ari Henning, join the podcast there,
Hetero life
Zachary. So we are now on to the final section of the podcast. For those of you that have never listened to a Highside, Lowside podcast, shame on you. But just keep in mind that you are now here. We are now your friends, and we are moving on to the Highside, Lowside questions portion. And this is where you have written in either on YouTube or if you are listening to the podcast, you've sent an email over to highsidelowside@RevZilla.com. And we are now going to respond to some select questions. And we are going to start off with the first one that came in via email. And this is from Patty. That's P-A-D-D-Y, not P-A-T-T-Y. And Patty said, I didn't have any friends that ride, and I started this motorcycle hobby all by myself. I feel like I'm in a bubble without any sort of tangible community. Sure, there's forums and Facebook groups, etc., but what I feel would really help me out and improve my rider skills immensely are some peers. Some people that can mentor me and guide me through mechanical repairs and evolving in sport riding. It seems I can't find anybody locally that fits me, and it's a bummer. It's a bummer.
Yeah. So I feel like we've talked about this maybe once before.
Yes.
Of finding riding community, and I feel like you have better answers than I do. So I'll let you take the meat of it. But basically, what we'd recommend in this situation is the social media and the internets, right? That's the way to find sort of riding groups. I'm sure that's harder now with the old pandemic going on to a certain extent, but yeah, I think that the looking around and trying to find a Facebook group or something like that is probably the ticket. You've got a little bit of experience with this.
But no, I would just say more specifically. So, because Patty says, forums and Facebook groups, et cetera, are great, but they want someone in person. I want to be clear on this because we have recommended social media in the past. We're not recommending social media where like all you do is go on Instagram and scroll up and comment to one another.
Yeah.
But if you use those groups to actually find ride meetups, we had a local Philly riders Facebook group and they meet for beers on Tuesdays. And again, COVID has changed a lot of this. I am sure that the world will return to normal, eventually. So something to just keep in mind is using those social media sites and groups to find places that there are riders locally meeting up. Then showing up to a ride day, showing up to an event, whether that's if it's sport riding that it sounds you're into, sign up for a track day, and do a beginner track, do like one of those beginner days that they have, or coaching, and then go from there. But to Zach's point, if you're going to use social media, it's not enough just to go on and leave comments for people that have pretty bikes, but use it to find where there's actual physical meetups and then go talk to people.
Yeah, I like the track day. I think there's, if you're into sport riding, track day is a great idea. If you're into riding off road, then go to some sort of event or training course or something like that. You're likely to find someone who's into that kind of thing.
Well, we had talked earlier, we had
nice.
mentioned about the riding schools and stuff. And, when I first started getting into adventure riding,
hang on.
We've got an appearance again.
Something to say. What do you think Patty should do for riding groups?
For those of you, that's good. Yeah, for those of you listening on the podcast, Zach is holding his cat. So yeah, but to the point of when I started getting into adventure riding, I didn't know anybody, in the community, and I took a riding course, a local school, and I met one friend out of it. Right, we had a class of 12 people, and there's one person that I kind of hung around with, and then I went to an adventure event that the Alt Rider had sponsored, and I found 2 people. That rode. And then my group just kind of grew from there. So definitely showing up at events, whatever medium of motorcycle you're riding, I think getting involved in some of those local events is a great way to do that.
Local events. That's the answer, Patty. Sorry.
And use social media to find the local events if you don't know where they're being held.
The next question also came in via email, from John, if that is his real name.
John, not Jon.
Thank you for being specific. John is in his mid-40s and learning to ride, and just moved to Manila, which is a very large city in Southeast Asia. And he's seeing scooters and motorcycles being used around the city as a valuable tool for transportation. He loves this idea. He also qualifies this by saying, I come back to the issue of risk. As a general aviation pilot, I accept some of our hobbies and passions involve risk, sometimes with serious consequences. Ironically, when I was getting my pilot's license, I used to tell my wife that at least it wasn't nearly as dangerous as riding a motorcycle. Ha! Curious to hear how you all think about risk beyond simple platitudes. This could almost be its own podcast, but it's not going to be.
It could be, but we could start it here.
Yeah, so we could start here. So this is a good question, John. And I don't think that there is any way around the fact that riding a two-wheeled vehicle does introduce risks that you don't have in other parts of your life. And that's something that I think you should face up with. I don't think that there's any beating around that bush. I don't think there's there's no sense in beating around the bush. There's no value in trying to convince yourself that it's not risky. I think what you do is tell yourself that it is, and then consider what you will take from the pastime, what you will take from the mode of transportation, and how worth it you think that it is. And it sounds like if you're a general aviation pilot and you fly small planes by yourself, you are very familiar with being prepared and taking on a journey with a very strict set of parameters and understanding what you need to do and what you need to not do in order to keep yourself safe. And I think that's exactly the right attitude to have when you go on a motorcycle ride or take a scooter across the city. And this is one of the reasons that it's very common for professional motorcycle racers to be hobbyist pilots. And there's a lot of crossover between flying small planes and riding motorcycles. for this reason, I think.
I would say too, I mean, it's acceptable risk. Like I think for you, John, what is your level of acceptable risk? I know that for myself personally, I've had conversations with loved ones and say, listen, if God forbid something were to happen and I go, this way, then just know that like this was something I made the decision to do. With that acceptable risk, there's things that you can do to counterbalance it out, right? You can wear the appropriate gear, take some kind of a rider training course, and practice. If you can find a parking lot, if you can find some place where you're not going to have to compete with other objects such as cars or other people on bicycles or motorcycles, you can help to alleviate some of the risk by making sure that you are as prepared as possible. And someone that's a pilot is probably familiar with all the training that would go into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So a very specific answer for you, John, in Manila is don't start riding a full-size motorcycle in Manila. That's my first piece of advice to do with risk. I would try to do it somewhere where there are fewer people, and increase your fluency with controlling the vehicle before you go into a place, such a huge city like that. But I do hope that you go down that path. I think that getting around a big city on a scooter is one of the great ways to see big cities is to have a scooter. So I hope that you do that.
All right. So the last question of the day is actually one that I'm going to ask of. I'm going to throw it out to you first, Zach, because this kind of came up from a comment that you made. And the comment was based on the best and worst motorcycle news of 2020, season 3, episode 4. Bruce is the one that wrote in via email. And Bruce says, there was a comment made by Zack near the end of the episode regarding his desire to see a turbo motorcycle.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce.
He's throwing it back to you, Zack. And he said there was no real response to his suggestion. And this amazes Bruce. Bruce is amazed by this. He has a 2004. I'm not done yet. He goes on to let us know that he drives a Ford truck with EcoBoost. It's got a twin turbo. And, he then tells us that he can pull 12,000 pounds and yada, yada, yada. Bruce is also 71 years old. He's not looking for a lot of power, but he would appreciate more range while not increasing weight. He rides a 2019 KTM 390 Duke, which gets 70 miles to the gallon. His son has an Aprilia. They both live in the Southwest, few far gas stations. I don't know exactly where that's coming into play, but he would say that a small displacement turbo could reliably solve his issues, is what he's saying.
Thank you, Bruce. So this is right in the middle of our Highside, Lowside demographic, I assume, a 71-year-old from the Southwest. I say that in jest. I very much appreciate you listening, Bruce, if you are listening. And I totally agree with you. And the Ford F-150 EcoBoost is a perfect example of why I think that this technology could be applied to motorcycles, right? Like he says he gets 24 miles to the gallon on the highway, but he can pull 12,000 pounds. That's, so
that's what you want out of your 390 Duke. You want to be able to tow a tugboat behind you.
Relax, Spurg and Dunbar. I'm not done yet. What he's saying is, he says very specifically, I have a small bike. He has a KTM 390, which is a great motorcycle. His son has an Aprilia leader bike, so he's got a Tuono or something maybe, and the range is garbage. And he's thinking, why can't I have a small bike that has good punch up top from a turbo, but if I just keep it at 4,000 RPM while I cruise down the highway, I can still get 60, 70 miles to the gallon.
So, Bruce,
why can't we do that? No, hey,
so
answer Bruce's questions.
I am.
Why can't we do that?
They've tried to. So the problem that we have with turbo technology, and I'm gonna start off by saying I, sir, am no engineer, but the problem with cars, you can do a twin turbo, much like his Ford F-150 EcoBoost, and the twin turbo design puts boost in at the lower RPMs and then a second turbo for higher RPMs, and it gives you a leveled out power band experience. The problem with motorcycles is that you don't have all the room in the world like you do underneath the hood of a giant Ford F-150. So the idea of putting two turbos on a motorcycle doesn't necessarily work out. They've tried doing this in the 80s. They've put turbos on motorcycles.
Tried doing it in the 80s?
I mean, they did it.
That doesn't mean they can't do it now.
It failed. Drove up insurance costs, made the bikes extremely hard to ride because there was a turbo lag. You'd be like halfway through and you're like, oh, cool. And all of a sudden be like, bam! And Bruce is flying off the back of his bike. So this has been tried before. Bruce, if you haven't already checked it out.
That's a crummy response. You can't say that they tried it in 1986, so he can't do it now. End of story.
But because the performance has gotten so good, they don't need to. I mean, even when you look at what Kawasaki's doing, they've got their supercharged bikes. And I would argue that if you had to pick between a Z900 or the ZH2, like I would rather just have the base Z900. So.
Yeah, but a supercharger is a whole different story. That's a different deal.
Because it winds up evenly. It's something that is more progressive, and you don't need two of them to be able to leverage this out. I just don't think. I think turbo is something that's a solution for a problem that. I mean, here's the thing.
You're saying no one's asking for it. Bruce is asking for it.
Bruce is asking for a bike that gives him performance, and it sounds like he's willing to sacrifice a little bit of his miles per gallon to be able to get a little bit more performance, right?
No, he is not. Bruce is not willing to do that. I don't
so
know
he wants
Bruce
to get
very well,
71 miles to the gallon, and he wants to just put, but he wants to put along at 70 horsepower, basically. His 390 Duke makes about 44 horsepower and gets 71 miles to the gallon. I would argue that Bruce could buy a Z650, get a little bit more power, and end up at 50 miles to the gallon, and probably be happy with where he ends up.
Okay. Well, I would like to go on the record and say that I don't think you should have to compromise, Bruce. I think that you should be able to have your 70 miles to the gallon and your horsepower, and let the motorcycle industry be on notice. Bruce and I demand satisfaction.
So you're telling me that you think that if Bruce straps a giant turbo onto his 390, he's going to maintain 71 miles a gallon, and he's going to get all the performance that he's looking for?
I'm not saying that Bruce should do it. I'm saying that HRC should do it, or someone who's smarter than
so
Bruce.
Honda. So Honda should build a turbocharger for his 390. Is what you're saying? You're going to hold this whole podcast. You're holding Honda responsible
you're being
for KTM not
obtuse.
putting it.
I'm saying build a motorcycle. Have a company build a motorcycle, not a Honda put a turbocharger on a KTM. You twit. I'm saying a company with a large R&D department should make a turbo motorcycle because it has potential to make sense. Perhaps the fact that they have not done it means that they've tried and it doesn't work. But I don't like your reasoning. I don't like they tried it in the 80s and that therefore
All right,
it doesn't work.
ladies and gentlemen, if you agree with Mr. Quartz, shoot us an email. Let us know that you want turbochargers on your motorcycle.
Jesus.
Throw it in the comments section below on YouTube. If you agree with me and you don't think that turbochargers are a necessity in this day and age of technology, here's the guy that doesn't want TFT dashes, but he wants a turbocharger on his motorcycle. You're a walking contradiction, my friend.
Aren't we all, Spurgeon?
Aren't we all?
Okay, so as Spurgeon
we had a whole
said,
conversation about ABS where I'm like, yeah, ABS is really good. And like 2 podcasts ago, I'm like, if somebody tells you need ABS on a motorcycle, tell them to shove it where the sun don't shine. We're all just walking contradictions here at Highside, Lowside.
Yeah. It's entirely possible that we don't know what we're doing. Okay. Anyway, as Spurgeon said, please send us an email at highsidelowside@revzilla.com or leave a comment on YouTube. Or if you are a truly noble soul, go to iTunes and leave a review where you could win a free t-shirt as nharvey17 did in this very episode. Plus, if you leave a review, it helps us with distribution of the show. More people listen and learn about our contradictions.
And if you didn't win a t-shirt, just remember, you can always buy a t-shirt with a credit card.
Okay. We're back to sales pitches now.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Thanks.
Thank you for another great episode. Zach, why don't you take it out? I cut you off there. Go ahead. Say goodbye to the folks.
I was just going to say thank you so much from Ari Henning to Spurgeon Dunbar to me, Zack Quartz. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you hanging out with us, and we hope we'll see you next time on the next Highside, Lowside. Later, everybody.